I woke up one day and was having vision issues, could hardly see, knocked out my hearing, which threw off my equilibrium, my balance, and I couldn't walk.
For most of his life, Ashton Kutcher was the picture of effortless success. The charming star who broke through as the goofy Kelso on That 70s Show went on to conquer Hollywood, television, and business, turning charisma into a billion-dollar empire. But behind that confident smile, few knew that Kutcher was fighting a terrifying battle that would leave him unable to see, hear, or even walk properly. In 2019, everything changed. What started as fatigue and dizziness spiraled into something far more sinister. Kutcher was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease called vasculitis, a condition that causes the immune system to attack the body's blood vessels, leading to inflammation that can shut down vital organs. For nearly a year, Ashton lived in fear, uncertain if he would ever return to normal life again. The actor who once seemed invincible suddenly faced his own mortality. He couldn't see clearly, couldn't hear well, and sometimes struggled to even stand. "It took me a year to rebuild everything," he later revealed. But what he learned during that year changed him forever. This is the story of how Ashton Kutcher, actor, entrepreneur, husband and father, faced the darkest chapter of his life. It's not a story about tragedy. It's a story about survival, resilience, and rediscovering what truly matters when fame and fortune fade into the background. Before Ashton Kutcher became one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood, he was just a small-town kid from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, with a wild imagination and an even wilder dream. Born in 1978, Ashton grew up in a modest working-class family. His parents instilled in him the values of hard work and humility, but his childhood wasn't always easy. His twin brother, Michael, was born with cerebral palsy and endured heart complications that required a transplant at just 13 years old. Watching his brother fight for his life would later shape Ashton's deep empathy and quiet resilience. Kutcher's early life was defined by contrasts. The mischievous class clown who often got in trouble, yet secretly carried a sense of responsibility beyond his years. After high school, he attended the University of Iowa to study biochemical engineering, inspired by his brother's medical struggles. But fate had other plans. While working part-time and struggling to make ends meet, Ashton was approached by a talent scout who convinced him to enter a modeling competition. To his surprise, he won, and soon found himself walking runways in New York City for Calvin Klein. But Ashton wasn't content to stay a model. Within months, he packed up and moved to Los Angeles to chase an even bigger dream: acting. In 1998, everything changed when he landed the role of Michael Kelso on That 70s Show. His goofy charm and effortless comedic timing made him an instant fan favorite. Hollywood quickly took notice, and Kutcher's rise was meteoric. He starred in box office hits like Dude, Where's My Car?, Just Married, and The Butterfly Effect. Proving he could do both comedy and drama off-screen, he built an empire as a producer and investor, creating MTV's Punk'd and backing major startups like Airbnb and Uber. To the public, Ashton Kutcher seemed unstoppable, a man with talent, money, intelligence, and charisma to spare. But behind the success, life was moving fast. The fame, the work, the constant travel, it all left little room for rest. And as the years went on, his body began to send warnings that something wasn't right. No one, not even Kutcher himself, could have imagined that his biggest battle wasn't with Hollywood, but with his own health. In 2019, Ashton Kutcher's life took a sudden and terrifying turn. What began as ordinary fatigue and occasional dizziness quickly escalated into something far more alarming. His vision blurred unexpectedly, his hearing faded, and his balance deteriorated to the point where he sometimes couldn't even stand without help. For months, doctors struggled to find an explanation. Kutcher, known for his active and disciplined lifestyle, couldn't comprehend what was happening to him. Then came the diagnosis that would change everything: vasculitis, a rare autoimmune disease that causes the body's immune system to attack its own blood vessels. The inflammation restricts blood flow, damaging vital organs and tissues. In severe cases, it can lead to blindness, hearing loss, or even organ failure. Ashton was shocked. He had always seen himself as strong and healthy, the kind of man who could push through anything. But now, his body was betraying him in ways he couldn't control. It knocked out my vision, it knocked out my hearing, it knocked out my equilibrium, he later revealed in an interview. You don't really appreciate things until they're gone. For nearly a year, Kutcher faced the most humbling and frightening experience of his life. Tasks as simple as walking across the room became exhausting. He couldn't see properly, couldn't hear his children's laughter clearly, and couldn't even trust his own body to remain steady. For a man used to control of his career, his body, his success, this loss was devastating, but Ashton refused to give up. He underwent months of treatment, physical therapy, and strict medical supervision. His wife, Mila Kunis, became his anchor through it all, supporting him as he rebuilt his strength step by step. He focused on nutrition, rest, and gratitude, learning to slow down in ways he never had before. During his recovery, Kutcher often reflected on how fragile life truly is. He'd always chased success, but this illness forced him to confront mortality and humility. He once said, "You don't really realize how lucky you are to just be alive until you almost lose it." This wasn't just a physical battle. It was an emotional and spiritual awakening. For the first time, Ashton Kutcher was forced to stop running, to sit with himself, and to find meaning beyond ambition. The man who once seemed invincible now carried a quiet wisdom, the kind that only comes from nearly losing everything. As Ashton Kutcher slowly began to regain his strength, the journey back to health wasn't quick or easy. The man who had once thrived on constant motion was now learning patience in the stillness. Every morning became a small victory. Walking without losing balance, being able to see clearly, and hearing his children's voices again. "It took me about a year to build everything back," he shared. "You don't really realize what you have until you lose it." His recovery demanded discipline, but it also demanded surrender. For someone as driven as Kutcher, accepting his body's limits was the hardest part. He shifted his mindset from pushing through to healing through. Meditation, clean eating, and rest replaced the high-speed lifestyle of movie sets and business deals. He leaned on the love of his wife, Mila Kunis, who supported him quietly, reminding him that strength wasn't about productivity, it was about presence. When Kutcher finally returned to public life, fans noticed the difference. He was calmer, more grounded, his words slower but more intentional. Gone was the manic energy of the prankster who once ran punked. In its place stood a man who had learned to live deliberately. Ashton began speaking openly about his illness, not for sympathy but for awareness. He wanted people to understand how easily health can be taken for granted. "You really start seeing everything differently," he said. "Every sunrise feels like a gift." His words inspired many, especially those facing chronic or invisible illnesses. During his recovery, he also reconnected with his purpose beyond fame. He poured his energy into his non-profit organization, Thorn, which combats child exploitation online. For Kutcher, it wasn't about red carpets anymore. It was about using his platform for good. His health scare reminded him that legacy isn't measured in box office numbers, but in the impact one leaves behind. As he rebuilt his physical strength, he also rebuilt his inner world. Spirituality became central to his life. He spoke often about gratitude and mindfulness, saying, "The moment you start appreciating life instead of controlling it, peace finds you." Though vasculitis had threatened to end everything he'd worked for, it instead became the catalyst for his transformation. The illness stripped away everything superficial and left behind something pure, a man who truly understood the fragility and beauty of being alive. When he finally returned to acting, appearing in projects like Your Place or Mine and Vengeance, audiences could see it, a softer, wiser Ashton Kutcher. The sparkle in his eyes was still there, but it carried depth now, the kind that only comes from surviving the unthinkable. Today, at 63, Ashton Kutcher stands as a man transformed, not just by success, but by survival. The experience that once nearly ended his life has now become the cornerstone of his. Today, at 63, Ashton Kutcher stands as a man transformed, not just by success, but by survival. The experience that once nearly ended his life has now become the cornerstone of his wisdom. He no longer sees life through the lens of fame or fortune. Instead, he views every day as a second chance, a gift he's determined not to waste. Kutcher has spoken openly about how his illness shifted his priorities. Before vasculitis, his life was a blur of movie sets, investments, and endless schedules. Now his focus is simpler: family, health, and purpose. "You can't buy time," he said in a reflective interview. "You can't buy peace. You earn it by living right." With his wife, Mila Kunis, and their 2 children, Ashton has embraced a quieter, more intentional lifestyle. He spends most of his time at home, raising his kids, working on his philanthropy, and finding joy in the little things. Those who meet him today describe him as peaceful, thoughtful, and unhurried, a man who has learned how to be rather than just do. His organization, Thorn, remains one of his proudest accomplishments. The nonprofit's mission to protect children from online exploitation has helped save countless lives. Kutcher often says that the work gives his fame a purpose, transforming the attention he once used for entertainment into something that creates lasting change. The illness taught him vulnerability and gratitude. He often speaks about the beauty of imperfection, reminding others that struggles are not signs of weakness, but opportunities to grow. "You don't really know yourself until life humbles you," he said. "That's when the real you shows up." While Ashton rarely takes on acting roles now, his influence is still deeply felt. He's a mentor, a humanitarian, and a symbol of resilience. Fans who once admired his humor and charm now admire his strength and depth. The man who used to chase success has instead found serenity in authenticity. The tragedy of Ashton Kutcher's illness became the turning point that gave his life meaning. He learned that the body can fail, careers can fade, and fame can vanish. But kindness, love, and gratitude endure. When he looks back, he doesn't see loss. He sees transformation. "I'm lucky," he said simply. "Lucky to be alive, lucky to still feel joy, and lucky to know what really matters." Ashton Kutcher's story is no longer just about Hollywood fame. It's about a man who faced darkness, fought through pain, and emerged lighter, wiser, and infinitely more human. And that, more than any movie or business deal, may be the greatest role he's ever played.